Amber rain came sideways that day, bright and strange against the black metal of Thule 7. Every storm had its rhythm, and Elias Ward could usually read it like music. Count the seconds between the pressure alarms, listen to the shift of the hull's tone as methane sleet thickened over the domes. But this time the sound was wrong, a kind of low, dragging scrape that came before the power flickers. He'd been walking back from the maintenance corridor when the call crackled through the station speakers. Systems Chief Ward to Intake Bay 3. Immediate assistance. By the time he got there, the merchant had already unrolled his shame on the deck. A torn tarp, half-frozen rations, and two figures huddled beneath a woolless shawl. Mother and daughter, their faces rhymed with frost and disbelief. The man's words were flat as tin. A blanket, Chief, or one night, or take the daughter, your choice. For a heartbeat no one breathed. The trader wasn't smiling out of cruelty, just the worn-down vacancy of someone who'd stopped believing anything better could happen. But the words still cut through the recycled air like a blade. Elias felt the same ache in his ribs he always did when heat dropped. A phantom of that Ganymede winter years ago, the one that had stolen his wife because some idiot had mislogged a part. He saw her face superimposed on the frozen women in front of him and made the same decision he had failed to make then. To do something. He closed the ledger, the one that ruled every ration, every coil, every life, and said quietly, "No trade. You're both coming with me." He keyed open his private hatch, ushering them into the warmth of Systems Bay, and behind him the merchant's grin spread, a strange, knowing thing. Outside, lightning blew as Neptune's heart flashed across the sky. Somewhere above, the storm tripped the outer sensors, and Thule 7 groaned like a living creature. Elias didn't know it yet, but that smile meant someone else had been waiting for this exact moment. The walk to his quarters took them through corridors smelling faintly of solvent and rust. The younger woman, barely 20 by human measure, carried herself upright despite trembling hands. The older one moved with controlled grace, every motion deliberate, like she was measuring not to take up too much space. When the door sealed behind them, the station's background hum softened. Recycled air sighed through vents like a long exhale. Elias fetched the only 2 thermal blankets he had left and handed them over. Names? The mother hesitated before answering, voice low and resonant. Saya of House Keth. She rested a hand on her daughter's arm. And this is Isla. That name struck something faint in him, Keth. A noble line from the outer colonies. He remembered seeing it stamped on cooling units during the Ganymede contracts. The family had fallen out of favor after a scandal about falsified manifests. He hadn't thought about them in years. "I don't care what house you're from," he said, handing over a steaming cup of water laced with a trace of nutrient salts. "You'll stay until the storm passes. After that, station regs can decide what to do." Saya met his eyes. Her irises held a faint phosphorescence, a Kethery trait. "You risk sanction by giving us shelter. Hospitality doesn't extend to the exiled." Elias shrugged, the gesture half humor, half weariness. "Regulations can freeze to death before my guests do." That earned the smallest flicker of a smile from Isla, and even Saya's shoulders relaxed a notch. For a few quiet minutes, the storm's fury became just another part of the background symphony of the station. Metal, wind, life. Then the first alarm wailed. A red strip pulsed along the bulkhead. "Pressure drop detected," the AI announced calmly. "Cafeteria dome temperature falling." Elias's instincts flared. He tapped the nearest wall console and saw numbers sliding in the wrong direction. Someone had throttled the south span's heat flow. Not a mechanical failure, a deliberate reroute. "Stay here," he told them. "If the lights go, the emergency heater under the bunk kicks in." Saya rose instantly. "You'll need hands. I'll need you safe." Her reply was flat. "Safety's an illusion. Work is real." She pulled the blanket tighter around Isla and followed him out before he could protest. The cafeteria was already gathering bodies when he arrived. Miners in stained pressure suits, hydroponics techs, the quartermaster Voss leaning against the ration console with the smug certainty of someone who thought the system would always protect him. "Chief Ward," Voss said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I was wondering how long it would take for you to report your little side arrangement. 2 Ketheri drifters and somehow a missing blanket from storage? Convenient. Murmurs rippled through the room. Saya's head stayed high, Isla's chin set in mirrored defiance. Elias ignored Voss's bait and pulled up the maintenance display on the wall. Save it. We've got a half-degree drop every 5 minutes. That's a duck choke or a stolen coil. Either way, we fix it first, argue later. He enlarged the schematic. Thin red veins of the heating network blinked erratically. One section pulsed slower than the rest. He'd expected a leak, but Saya stepped forward, studying the flow. Not a leak, she said, finger tracing the lines. Condensation ice. The pressure's wrong for a puncture. It's a blockage. Voss snorted. And you're an engineer now? Saya didn't look at him. Ketheri ships run hotter than human ones. We solved this problem centuries ago. Cycle these 2 dampers together, out of phase by 1 second. Elias weighed the risk, then gestured to a tech. Do it. The vents shuddered. A gust of warm air rolled across the room. People's breath stopped fogging. The temperature monitor climbed back to normal. Even Voss's smirk faltered. Elias turned to the crowd. Anyone else feel like arguing? Or shall we get the insulation team moving? 3 volunteers rose immediately. Saya and Isla joined them without a word. That's when respect started, quiet, reluctant, but real. Hours later, with the ducts humming steady again, Elias returned to Systems Bay. The 2 Ketheri sat cross-legged on the floor near the heater, Isla half asleep, Saya awake and alert. You knew exactly what was wrong, he said. Saya's answer came after a long pause. I was chief of logistics for my house, before I was exiled for choosing audit over silence. Whistleblower. She inclined her head once. Your word for it, yes? He could see now that her hands weren't delicate. They were the hands of someone used to tools, to precision. Her presence was substantial but never domineering, like a well-balanced machine that ran quietly but carried immense power. People around here think exile means useless, Elias said. They're wrong. And you think rescue makes you righteous? She countered gently. He almost smiled. No, just practical. Warm bodies keep stations running. She studied him, something unreadable in her gaze. Then practicality saved us both tonight. Later, when the shift alarms changed tone and the others had drifted back to duty, Elias pulled up the heater logs to close the file. That's when he noticed the discrepancy. Inventory tags on 3 coil units had been peeled off, reapplied crooked. Each one carried a duplicate serial, perfect except for a checksum error that only someone like him would catch. Coils don't disappear on their own. They walk when someone helps them walk. He ran a trace on clearance codes and froze. The stolen parts had been signed out under his ID. Elias stared at the screen until his reflection blurred in the glass. Behind him, Saya's voice broke the silence. You found something. He nodded slowly. Yeah, my own name where it doesn't belong. She stepped beside him, eyes scanning the data. Someone's using your credentials to move heat stock. That isn't theft for profit. It's positioning. He looked up. For what? She folded her arms. If coils are walking off the walls, she said softly. Someone plans a freeze. The station lights flickered once more, dim to amber. And in the distance, a door alarm held open. That was the moment Elias Ward realized the storm outside wasn't the only one closing in. The hearing notice came before dawn. Standard JRC formatting. All sterile caps and clipped politeness. Resource misallocation review. 0900 hours. Cafeteria Bay. Elias Ward rubbed a hand over his face, the grit of sleepless hours clinging like frost. He had spent most of the night auditing access codes, line by line, until his own eyes blurred into static. Someone had used his clearance to move heater coils into a locked cargo ring, and unless he proved otherwise, the consortium would tag him for dereliction, fraud, or both. Outside the viewport, Titan's clouds were a dull bronze, streaked with slow lightning. The storm hadn't let up all night, but inside the station it was calm. the kind of heavy calm that happens before people decide who to blame. Saya and Isla were already awake, seated at the workbench with mugs of rehydrated coffee. The steam fogged the air, briefly disguising how tired they looked. Isla had tied her hair back with a torn strip of insulation tape. Saya was tracing a rough schematic on the table with her finger, her posture straight despite the fatigue. "You don't have to come to this," Elias said, pulling on his station coat. Saya didn't look up. "If I stay, I look ungrateful. If I go, I look complicit. I've lived this pattern before." "You think they'll listen?" She gave a humorless smile. "Listening and hearing are different acts, Chief Ward." He didn't argue. When they arrived, the cafeteria had been rearranged into something between a tribunal and a stage play. Folding tables formed a dais. The JRC flag, a stylized gear and torch, hung from a rail pipe. Quartermaster Voss stood to one side in his best pressed jumpsuit, pretending to check readings on a datapad he wasn't actually holding. Beside him sat a woman in a silver mantle, sharp-eyed and too clean for Titan. JRC's appointed auditor, Rhea Vaughn. Next to her, a tall, pale Ketheri envoy leaned on a cane that was clearly more ornament than support. His crest ring caught the light House Keth, but not Saya's branch. Rival Elias guessed instantly. When Elias stepped forward, Voss wasted no time. "Chief Ward, you filed a discrepancy report regarding heater coil inventory. After review, we found your clearance key associated with off-ledger transfers. Do you deny initiating these?" Elias kept his voice even. "I deny moving any coils. My system was spoofed." Rhea Vaughn looked up from her screen. "Can you prove that?" "Not yet." "Then it's conjecture." Before Elias could respond, the envoy's voice slid into the room. Smooth, cultured, every syllable honed. "Chief Ward is a human of some repute, yes, but we all know stress can bend ethics. Titan is far from oversight. Temptation thrives in the cold." Murmurs spread through the audience, station techs, miners, cooks, people Elias had fixed things for a dozen times. Most looked uneasy. A few looked eager for scandal. Then the envoy's gaze drifted to Saya and Isla. "And you," he said, his tone laced with indulgent cruelty, "House Keth's lost lamb, trailing your debt across the rim. Even in exile, you still draw attention." Saya's chin rose slightly. "I was cast out for naming a lie. I would do it again." "Such courage." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yet you stand beside the accused. How poetic." Voss cleared his throat, eager to pile on. "Seems Chief Ward may have been persuaded by certain personal interests to adjust inventory on behalf of these guests." That got laughter from somewhere in the back. The kind of laughter that's really just permission to be cruel. Elias's stomach turned. He thought of saying nothing, that silence would show contempt. But then he saw Isla's shoulders tighten, her jaw lock the way young people do when they're trying not to cry in public. That decided him. He stepped forward. "If this station believes I'd trade its heat for favors, then you've forgotten who keeps it breathing. And if you think two people under shelter are a scandal, you should look closer at who keeps signing extra shipments that never reach the logs." Rhea Vaughn's stylus froze mid-note. "Are you implying collusion, Chief Ward?" "I'm implying theft," he said. "And I can show you where to start looking." He motioned to the sidewall, pulling up the cafeteria's diagnostic panel. Numbers rolled across the display, vent pressures, duct temperatures, all routine. But then Elias overlaid last night's heat flow data. Red highlighted every duct section that had drawn 20% above normal, then abruptly dropped to 0. "These are coil movement signatures," he said. "You can fake paperwork, not thermodynamics. Someone's bleeding heat to cargo ring C." Saya stepped forward without waiting for permission. "And if you compare the timing of those fluctuations with maintenance shifts," she said, "you'll find they coincide with Quartermaster Voss's authorization blocks." The room stilled. Even the vent fans seemed to pause. Voss's face went mottled. That's coincidence." "Coincidences?" Saya said softly. "Don't stack into patterns this clean." Rhea Vaughn glanced between them, calculating. "If you're wrong, Chief Ward, this is defamation." "Then prove me wrong," Elias said. She studied the display for a long moment, then closed her tablet. Very well. We'll schedule an internal audit. Pending results, the misallocation charge is suspended. Voss looked ready to burst. You can't just. Dismissed, she said without looking at him. But the envoy wasn't done. One more item, he purred. House Keth retains rights to the conduct of its citizens, even exiles. By edict, Saya and her offspring remain property of House Keth until their debts are forgiven. Should she continue to interfere with corporate process, I will request her extradition under Interhouse Treaty. Saya didn't flinch. Then make your request, she said. But know that I'm not the one interfering. I'm the one counting the missing coils. The envoy smiled as if that was exactly the answer he wanted. As you wish. The hearing broke apart like ice underfoot. People muttering, glancing sideways, dispersing. In the quiet aftermath, Elias found Saya and Isla back in Systems Bay, crouched over the same schematic as before, now marked with new notations. Isla had drawn lines in grease pencil connecting coil clusters to shift schedules. Saya was rewriting equations, humming faintly under her breath. You made enemies today, he said from the doorway. I already had them, she replied. Now they know I'm not cold. He came closer, watching her quick, precise movements. You could have stayed silent. I tried silence once, she said. It breeds rot. Elias leaned on the console beside her, showing her the updated maintenance logs. They'll lock down Cargo C now that I named it. Then we trace the bypass. Saya tapped a point on the map. Every system leaves residue. Whoever stole those coils still needs to hide the temperature drop. The reroute has to go through these ducts. Her logic was clean, her tone clinical. He found himself admiring the way her mind moved. Structured, exact, but always returning to fairness like a compass to north. Isla glanced up from her notes. You two talk like ducks are alive. Elias smiled faintly. They are in their way. Breathe wrong, and the whole body chokes. Then maybe the station just needs better lungs, she said. Saya chuckled, a sound like warm metal. That's what we're building. They worked until station night cycle dimmed the lights to amber. The hum of the vents became almost soothing. It would have been easy to forget the tension in the hall above. The envoy's smirk, the merchants who watched everything and whispered about humans and exiles sharing quarters. At one point, Saya paused, pressing a palm against the warm paneling. On my world, we'd call this a vow touch, she said quietly. When two people take on the same task, they press their hands to the same surface. It means the work owns you both equally. Elias mirrored her gesture, hand beside hers on the metal. The heat vibrated faintly beneath their skin. Then let's call it that. She looked at him for a long moment, unreadable, then returned to her notes. Vows are easy, she murmured. Keeping them is the work. By morning, they had enough data to track the siphon path. It ran like a hidden vein through the lower station, branching off near the water reclamation tanks, ending at Cargo C's sealed bulkhead. Elias keyed the hatch to ping its access log. A polite system voice answered, Inspection in progress. Please hold. He frowned. Inspection wasn't scheduled. Saya stepped forward. Ask it whose authority. The voice replied, Chief Ward Authorization, Code 7G1. Elias's pulse kicked. That was his override, one only he could generate. He hadn't used it in weeks. Can you trace it? He asked. Saya ran quick calculations, fingers moving like a pianist. The command originated from internal systems, but the timestamp overlaps with your presence in the cafeteria. Someone cloned your signature. Voss doesn't have that access. No, she agreed, but someone higher might. The envoy, perhaps, or JRC itself. Elias rubbed a hand over his face. Then this isn't just theft. The staged failure. Someone's building a freeze to justify abandoning this colony. Saya looked toward the sealed cargo ring, her expression distant and fierce all at once. If they plan to bury Thule 7 in ice, she said, they'll have to do it over our work. For a moment they stood in silence, the hum of the vents like a heartbeat around them. Then Isla, who had been watching from the console, said softly, "The storm's getting worse outside." Elias turned toward the viewport. The horizon glowed electric blue with another surge of lightning. The hull shuddered faintly under its impact. He exhaled, steadying himself. "Then we work faster." And as the lights flickered once, twice, and then steadied, he felt something he hadn't in years. Not hope exactly, but a sense that maybe this time, when the cold came, he wouldn't face it alone. The storm arrived like a living thing, slow at first, deceptive in its grace, then roaring with the force of an ocean trying to reclaim a shore. On Titan, storms didn't come in flashes. They rolled in sheets of orange haze and static that wrapped the outpost in a constant, groaning pressure. Every beam hummed with strain. Every pipe vibrated like a plucked string. And through it all, Thule 7's systems began to falter, one by one, like candles fighting a steady wind. By the second day, the temperature in the outer corridors had dropped by 5 degrees. The inner domes pulsed with emergency lights that flickered between amber and red. Vents hissed unevenly, carrying the smell of coolant mixed with metal fatigue. The storm wasn't just weather, it was cover. Someone was using the chaos to finish what they'd started. Elias stood over the central console in Systems Bay. His reflection fractured in the flickering monitors. The readouts were wrong in ways that only a human could notice, too clean, too symmetrical. The data loops weren't showing errors because someone had rewritten the diagnostics to hide them. Saya leaned over his shoulder, her voice low and steady. "They're masking consumption patterns. Look here, the same energy draw repeating every 34 seconds. It's a fake signal. Fake enough to fool the autobalancer," Elias muttered, punching in a manual override. The display shifted, flickered, then bled red across the screen. "There. Power drain from cargo ring C again. Same as before." Saya frowned, tracing the line with a gloved finger. "They're siphoning from life support. Not just heat. Oxygen reclamation, too." He turned to her. "They're choking the station from the inside out." She met his eyes, unflinching. "Then we pull the throat open before it closes." The emergency intercom buzzed before he could reply. Isla's voice came through, crisp but tense. "Chief Ward, main cafeteria's running cold again. We've got frost forming on the ducts and people crowding the vent stacks. I can only divert power manually for so long." Elias answered, "Stay there. Keep everyone calm. I'm rerouting primary flow." "Copy," she said. A beat, then quieter. "Mom, please hurry." The static between the words carried more weight than the message itself. By the time Elias and Saya reached the cafeteria, it looked like the inside of a giant's freezer. Vapor curled from vents like ghostly hands. People huddled in groups, sharing blankets, talking in low murmurs. The younger miners had started lighting portable burners, technically against regulation but better than frostbite. Voss stood on a chair near the ration counter, shouting above the hum. "We wouldn't be freezing if someone hadn't sabotaged the grid with their charity cases." He jabbed a finger toward Saya and Isla. "2 freeloaders and a chief who's forgotten who he works for." The crowd wavered between agreement and shame. Elias didn't waste words. He crossed to the main vent access, snapped off the panel, and shone his light inside. Ice crystals glittered like stars. He reached in, touched the inner wall. It was bone cold, far colder than it should have been this deep in the station. Saya crouched beside him, studying the frost pattern. "That's induced condensation," she said. "Someone's pulsing the fans at a harmonic frequency to stop the heat exchange. See the spiral structure?" He did. A precise, almost elegant pattern of ice grown through rhythm, not accident. Whoever did this knew the station's guts as well as he did. "Can you counter it?" he asked. Saya was already unstrapping her field kit. "We'll need a driver coil and your access to the pulse generators." He handed over his wrist console. "Show me." Together, they wired a portable resonance driver, matching the fan's frequency with a mirrored signal. The cafeteria fell into a strange quiet as the sound thrummed through the ducts. a low, vibrating hum that seemed to travel through bone. Children pressed close to their parents. Tools rattled faintly on the tables. Then, as suddenly as it began, the frost started melting. Steam rolled from the vents in a soft hiss, spreading warmth through the room like the first breath after drowning. Isla exhaled a shaky laugh. You just sang the heaters back to life. Saya's mouth curved. The station listens when spoken to correctly. It wasn't magic, Elias thought, it was competence. Pure, calm, unshowy mastery. The kind that came from understanding how things wanted to work before forcing them to obey. He caught Saya watching him out of the corner of her eye. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, as if to say, now you know what I'm good at. But their moment of reprieve was short-lived. When Elias returned to Systems Bay, the alarms were already flashing. The power logs showed something new, a cascade from the main reactor feed into cargo ring C, bypassing every standard control node. It was a direct siphon, deliberate and brutal. He opened the comm channel to command. This is Ward. I need a full lockdown on cargo C. Unauthorized draw detected. A voice answered, smooth and too calm. Hold, please. Inspection in progress. He froze. That same automated response again. The same mockery. Saya leaned over his shoulder. It's piggybacking on your code again. Elias slammed the console. They're using me as the failsafe. If I try to cut it off, the system thinks I'm self-locking and restores access. So we go under the system, Saya said. Manual relay override. That's buried in the lower crawlspace. You sure you can handle it? She gave him a look sharp enough to cut steel. You'll need someone who can fit through ducts and understand the math of airflow. He couldn't argue. They grabbed gear, flashlights, oxygen masks, portable heaters, and dropped into the maintenance shaft. The air down there smelled of oil, copper, and distant storms. The crawlspace was barely wide enough for one person, the walls slick with condensation. Each breath echoed in the metal tunnel like thunder far away. Halfway through, Elias's knees buckled against an uneven brace. He bit back a curse. His left leg still ached from the old Ganymede injury. Saya turned her light back, concern flickering across her features. You're slowing. Old break, he said. Nothing new. Hand me the driver. I can handle it. Her tone softened. Competence isn't stubbornness. He hesitated, then passed the driver forward. She adjusted the resonance dial with careful precision, every motion deliberate, controlled. You run the heat balance, she said. I'll crack the relay. He watched her move, methodical, fearless, graceful in the cramped space. Her shoulders brushed the metal as she reached the relay box and began dismantling it. Sparks flickered, lighting her slate-blue skin in flashes of orange. For a strange moment, the storm outside and the electricity inside seemed to pulse in rhythm. Almost, she murmured. Just a breath more. The relay clicked. A burst of light shot through the cable she held, and suddenly every light in the shaft turned white-hot. Elias shielded his eyes. The system rebooted with a rising whine, then settled into a steady hum. You did it, he said. Saya smiled faintly. We did it. The bypass is severed. Elias crawled closer, testing the current on his console. Power flow normalizing, but cargo seas still drawing heat. Whoever's in there has an independent source. Then they'll suffocate themselves eventually, Saya said. They've cut their own airflow. Unless they're using the emergency vent line. Her expression hardened. Which leads straight to the cafeteria. They emerged from the crawlspace just as the lights flickered overhead again. Isla met them in the corridor, face pale but resolute. There's noise coming from the floor vents, like something's moving through them. Elias felt his stomach drop. They're using the ducts as a tunnel. Who? Isla asked. Mercs, or corporate saboteurs. Doesn't matter. They're coming this way. Saya pressed the portable driver into Elias's hands. Reverse the pulse. Freeze the ducts behind them. Give them nowhere to go. He hesitated. If we miscalculate, we could crack the whole vent system. Then calculate right. Her confidence hit him like warmth in the cold. He set the driver frequency, matching her earlier calibration but inverted. The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor. Steam burst from a vent, followed by a shattering sound, a section sealing itself in solid frost. Another vent banged shut, the sound muffled as if the station itself exhaled. A few heartbeats later, the noise stopped. Elias shut the driver off. That's it. They're sealed out. Saya exhaled, sitting back against the wall. You work cleanly, Chief Ward. He met her eyes. You work better. For a long moment, the only sound was the storm outside, the faint ticking of contracting metal as the station adjusted to its new equilibrium. They returned to the cafeteria to find the crowd calmer, drawn by the returning warmth. Someone had set a pot of broth on the burner. The air smelled faintly of salt and comfort. Isla handed her mother a cup, grinning. Told you I'd keep them steady. Saya brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, affection flickering through her composure. You did well. Elias leaned against the bulkhead, watching them. Mother and daughter, steady as anchors in a world built on ice and politics. When the overhead lights stabilized, a faint murmur rippled through the colonists. Hope, fragile but real. Then a new tone cut through the air. A transmission ping. The Ketheri envoy's voice played over the station speakers, smug and composed. Attention Thule 7 personnel. By decree of House Keth, Saya of Keth is hereby recalled to her homeworld with full restoration of title and rights. Shuttle departing at dawn. Please prepare her for transfer. The cafeteria fell silent. Saya stared up at the speaker, unreadable. Isla's hand tightened on her arm. Elias's jaw clenched. After a long moment, Saya turned to him. They're trying to buy my silence. They're trying to erase you, Elias said. Outside, thunder rolled like a living drum, echoing through the dome. The storm had not ended. It had only paused to take another breath. Saya looked toward the viewport where the methane rain blurred the horizon. Then we hold until morning, she said quietly. And when that shuttle comes, we decide what kind of warmth we keep. Elias nodded once, the weight of the moment settling between them like gravity. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone inside the storm. Morning on Titan didn't look like morning anywhere else. The sun was a weak, distant coin, rising through methane haze that glowed pale gold for 10 minutes before dissolving into its usual bruised twilight. The storm had eased, but the silence it left behind was worse, like a held breath waiting for something to break. Elias Ward sat at the system's bay console, staring at the flickering message from Janus Resource Consortium headquarters. Promotion offer, Fleet Director, Saturn Rim. Immediate transfer. Housing included. Below the text was a simple note from Voss. Sign it, and this whole mess disappears. Titan runs itself better without idealists. He didn't delete it. He just let it blink on the screen like a warning light that didn't know whether it was meant to save him or tempt him. Behind him, Saya's reflection moved in the viewport. She was still dressed in the same simple gray work tunic from the night before, her sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. The exhaustion in her posture was hidden beneath composure, a quiet nobility she didn't have to announce. They're making you an offer, she said softly. He didn't turn. They're making me a bribe. Most bribes come dressed as promotions. He finally faced her. They're also sending a shuttle for you. Full restoration, they said. House Keth wants its prodigal mathematician back. Saya gave a short, humorless laugh. House Keth doesn't restore people. It recycles them. I'd go home, and they'd put me on display to prove their generosity. Then they'd silence me all over again. Still, Elias said, that's a roof, food, safety, a future for Isla. At that, her composure cracked for a second. Just a flicker, but he saw it, the instinctive flinch that only parents have when someone mentions their child's safety. I know, she murmured. But a future built on obedience isn't living. It's survival dressed up in fine clothes. Elias exhaled, rubbing his temples. The station hummed underfoot, a sound he usually found grounding. Today it only made him aware of how much it could all fall apart. You realize, he said quietly, if you stay, The House and JRC both will come after you. They'll cut supplies, close trade routes, spin stories. We'll be blacklisted. Then we'll find another way to stay warm. He looked up at her. You make it sound easy. It isn't, she said, voice steady. But it's right. There was a moment of silence, the kind that feels too large for the room it's in. The console beeped once, new incoming data. Elias turned to check it, grateful for distraction. The message wasn't from headquarters this time. It was from the outpost's outer sensor array. Proximity ping. Incoming vessel. Shuttle Aeon 13. Registry House Keth. ETA 2 hours. And attached, a personnel manifest with only one listed passenger. Saya of House Keth. Reinstated heir. By decree of Steward Erek Varn. Elias's hand hovered over the console. It's official, he said. Saya stepped closer, reading over his shoulder. Erek Varn, she murmured. He's the one who ordered the falsified manifests, the man I exposed. And now he's come to collect you. The cafeteria had been turned into something between a farewell and a political pageant. Someone, probably Voss, had arranged the tables with rations and mock decorations, strips of recycled foil pretending to be streamers. The envoy's voice droned through the intercom, broadcasting pleasantries about honor, reconciliation, and duty. Saya stood near the center, Isla by her side. Elias stayed in the back, watching the charade unfold. The colonists whispered as Saya passed. Half pity, half admiration. Some of them nodded slightly, as if silently thanking her for the heat still running through the vents. When the envoy appeared, sleek uniform, cane tapping rhythmically, the air grew colder despite the rising temperature. His smile was the kind that believed itself merciful. Saya of Keth, he said, projecting his voice to reach the crowd. Your house forgives all transgressions. You are restored to your rightful place. A transport waits to return you to warmth, civilization, and respect. He paused dramatically, then added with gentle venom. No more need to bury your gifts in this rusted human shelter. Elias saw Saya's jaw tighten, but her voice was calm when she spoke. Respect cannot be restored by decree. It must be earned. The envoy chuckled. So poetic. You always did mistake stubbornness for principle. He turned toward Elias. And you, Chief Ward, the consortium values your diligence. It regrets this unpleasantness. There's a position waiting, Fleet Director. Off Titan, far from these complications. Sign the offer, and the colony will receive fresh supplies, new coils, full funding. The room held its breath. Elias felt the weight of every tired face watching him. Men and women whose livelihoods depended on heat, food, oxygen, all things a single keystroke could take away. And beyond them, Saya and Isla, standing in a pool of soft light, the storm still whispering at the edges of the dome. He could take the deal, save the colony, walk away with clean hands. But his stomach twisted with the same familiar guilt he'd carried since Ganymede. The night his wife's heater failed and the contractors told him the parts would arrive after the audit. Bureaucracy over people. Rules over decency. He'd promised himself never again. He straightened slowly. I appreciate the offer, he said. But I'll stay. Voss muttered something under his breath. The envoy's smile didn't waver, but his eyes sharpened. Think carefully, Chief. Declining this could end your career. Elias met his gaze. Then I'll build a new one. Right here. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Small but real. The envoy's gaze flicked toward Saya. And you? Will you waste this chance at redemption? Or drag your daughter into exile again? Saya's voice was soft, but every word carried. You mistake exile for shame. I'd rather build truth in the cold than comfort on a lie. Isla stepped forward beside her mother, chin high. If House Keth wants loyalty, they can start by earning it. The envoy's composure cracked. Just slightly, a twitch near his mouth. Foolish sentiment. You think these miners will protect you when their rations dry up? You think this human will keep you warm when the consortium turns off the power? Elias took one step forward. We'll make our own heat. That line. Half defiance, half-promise, hung in the air like static. After the envoy left to prepare the shuttle, the cafeteria thinned. Some colonists lingered, whispering to each other about courage and stupidity in equal measure. Elias leaned against the wall, watching Saya as she quietly dismantled the mock decorations, folding each strip of foil with care instead of anger. Could have just torn them down, he said. Waste is still waste, she replied. Even when symbolic. He studied her for a long moment. You really meant what you said. About staying. Yes. It'll cost you everything you've fought to regain. She met his gaze. And what would I regain it for? To live in a palace built on silence? To teach my daughter to bow? He didn't answer. After a moment, she sighed and turned back to the table. You'll lose things too, Elias. Promotions. Resources. Friends in high places. I never liked high places, he said. Thin air up there. That earned him a small, genuine smile. For a few minutes, they stood in silence while the vents hummed. Outside, lightning crawled across the clouds like veins of fire. Then Isla appeared, clutching a tablet. Chief, Mom, you need to see this. She placed the tablet on the table, pulling up a recorded data burst intercepted by the outer sensors. The signal came from a frozen body recovered near the outpost perimeter, the traitor from the first night. His data wand had finally decrypted. Saya tapped it open. Transaction logs filled the screen, timestamps, credit routes, encrypted memos, JRC accounts, House Keth stewardship codes. It was all there. The proof of the artificial shortages, the manipulated shipments, the hidden deals that had starved a dozen colonies to drive up prices. Elias's pulse quickened. If this goes public, it will burn both the consortium and the house, Saya finished. But it will burn us too. They'll call it sabotage. Then we choose how to burn, Elias said. Saya closed the tablet, exhaling slowly. You realize this makes us targets. Already am. He looked at her. You? She met his eyes steadily. I stopped being afraid the night I lost my home. For the first time, Elias saw not the exile, not the refugee, but the leader she must have been, the kind of person who could turn principle into action without needing to shout. He felt something shift in him then, not infatuation but recognition. A quiet certainty that whatever storm came next, she would face it standing, not crawling. The following hours blurred into motion. Elias and Saya drafted a broadcast plan, released the data to independent colonies and guild networks simultaneously. Once truth was shared, no single authority could bury it. Isla handled encryption, her fingers quick over the keys, muttering under her breath like a musician setting tempo. The envoy returned once, demanding compliance, but found the cafeteria locked and empty. By the time he reached the system's bay, the transmission was already primed. Think, Saya, he barked, slamming his cane against the deck. You'll bring ruin on everyone here. She faced him calmly. Truth doesn't ruin systems. Lies do. He tried another tack. Sign the house pardon, and I'll make sure the consortium forgets the heat theft. I'll even name your daughter heir to a manufacturing charter. Do you know what that means? Power, legacy, comfort. Her gaze didn't waver. Comfort without conscience is decay. He sneered. And what will you eat when your defiance freezes your fields? Whatever we grow ourselves, she said and turned away. Elias hit the final key. The data pulse shot through the comm array, riding the storm's residual charge across Titan's network. A streak of static flared through the speakers, then cleared. The broadcast was live. The envoy's face went pale. You fools. You've doomed yourselves. Maybe, Elias said quietly, but at least we did it honestly. Outside, the storm began to rise again, wind keening against the domes like applause or warning. It was hard to tell which. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Saya stood beside him, shoulders square, eyes bright with tired defiance. Now we see who still wants to be warm, she said. And as thunder rolled through the methane sky, Elias realized he wasn't hearing an ending at all. Only the prelude to the kind of fight worth staying for. The storm returned that night with a vengeance. as if Titan itself had listened to the broadcast and decided to bear witness. Winds slammed against the domes like surf on glass, and blue lightning stitched the clouds into frantic veins. Thule 7's lights flickered between life and shadow, and every surface hummed with the low growl of a world under siege. Elias Ward stood in the system's bay, palms braced on the console. The status grid was a patchwork of orange alerts, air pressure fluctuations, power dips, temperature deviations. All manageable, all routine, except for the new red line flashing across the lower schematic. Unauthorized breach detected, cargo ring B. He'd expected retaliation. He just hadn't expected it to come this fast. Of course they'd send mercs, he muttered. Corporate hands too clean to break their own glass. Saya appeared at his side, already in her heavy work jacket, the reflective fabric dull from wear. Isla trailed behind her, tying her hair back, the same calm in her eyes that used to belong to soldiers or doctors. People who'd stopped being afraid of crisis because they'd run out of energy for fear. They're coming through the ducts, Isla said. Same pattern we sealed before. Only now they're cutting through the frozen sections. Elias glanced at Saya. They want the data backups. They want silence, she corrected. Outside, another thunder roll pressed against the hull. The mercenaries weren't waiting for dawn. Elias grabbed a pack of portable drivers from the rack and slung one over his shoulder. Then we don't give it to them. He started down the corridor, and Saya fell into step beside him. Ward, there's still time to hide in the inner dome, she said quietly. If they think the data was transmitted by now, they might not. He stopped, turning to face her fully. Hide? I spent half my life hiding behind procedures. If they want to shut us down, they'll have to come through me first. Something in his voice, steady, unshaken, made Saya's expression soften. You're an unreasonable man, she said. Practical, he replied. Just finally on the right side of it. They reached the junction to cargo ring B. The air there was sharp with coolant and dust, the floor vibrating with the dull rhythm of approaching steps. Measured military. The mercs were disciplined, not scavengers. That meant JRC or worse, house-sponsored enforcers. Elias pulled the panel off a maintenance duct and slid the portable driver's coil against the metal wall. He looked to Saya. Same frequency as before? She nodded. Invert the wave, build pressure instead of releasing it. You'll freeze their advance without collapsing the duct. He grinned faintly. You make sabotage sound like poetry. Only when the rhyme saves lives. They set the driver humming. The resonance built until the walls trembled like the skin of a drum. Far ahead, there was a muffled thump. Then another. Airlock sealing, ducts icing shut. The approaching footsteps staggered, followed by shouted curses and the sharp hiss of cutting torches. Saya adjusted the amplitude dial. They're stubborn. So are we. He flipped a secondary switch, redirecting auxiliary heat to the opposite corridor. The ducts glowed faintly, steam rolling through the junction. Within seconds, visibility dropped to mist. That was when the first merc slipped through a side hatch, black armor slick with condensation. The intruder raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a sudden burst of CO2 mist blinded him. Elias lunged forward, wrenching the weapon aside. Clattered to the floor. The merc coughed, blinking through fog. Never fought a snowstorm indoors before. Saya's voice cut through the haze. Welcome to our weather. She hit the duct release, and a gust of icy air swept the corridor, forcing the man backward. He hit the wall hard but alive, sliding to the floor. Elias sealed the hatch behind him. No deaths, Saya said. Not if we can help it. Elias nodded. Their tools, not the problem. They retreated toward the cafeteria, now repurposed as a command center. Isla had organized the miners into small groups, some armed with welders, others carrying med kits and heaters. The oldest workers guarded the children near the thermal banks, steady despite the shaking walls. Elias climbed onto a crate. Listen up. Cargo B's breached, but they're boxed in. We hold the line until the outer comm relays stabilize. A miner shouted, and if they don't? Saya's voice carried across the room. Then we make them wish they'd brought better heaters. A few nervous laughs broke through the tension, small but enough to breathe life back into the crowd. Isla brought over a display pad showing the live feeds from security cameras. They've cut power to the upper level, she said. But look! She zoomed in on one feed. The mercenaries weren't just searching. They were planting charges. They're trying to blow the ring, Elias said. Erase evidence, and us with it. Not if we reroute the pressure valves, Saya countered. The ring will vent itself safely if we open the right sequence. He hesitated. That's a manual job. She looked at him calmly. Then we'll do it manually. They split the task, Elias handling the south conduit, Saya the north. Isla stayed in the cafeteria to coordinate. The plan was simple. Vent the pressure before the mercs triggered their charges. But simple plans rarely survived the doing. The north conduit was half-frozen and darker than a coal shaft. Saya moved with methodical grace, breath steady inside her mask. She counted steps in her head. 1, 2, 3, each accompanied by the low hum of the storm pressing against the walls. When she reached the junction, her gloves brushed something smooth and alien. A detonator, warm from activation. Her pulse quickened. Elias, they've armed the charge already. His voice crackled through the comms. How long? 2 minutes, maybe less. Then cut the feed. I can't. It's wired into the coolant manifold. If I sever it, the whole section floods. She knelt beside the device, scanning its small readout. The code wasn't standard mercenary gear. It was house design, elegant and cruel. She could almost recognize the algorithmic rhythm. It's Keth technology, she whispered. They built it to look human-made. Can you disarm it? Elias asked. I can try. The hum of the detonator filled the tunnel, rising like a heartbeat. Her fingers moved quickly, tracing connections, overriding loops, feeding false inputs. Each movement brought back the memories she'd buried. Standing in a house workshop, explaining to her superiors why falsified manifests endangered entire colonies, being told to stay silent for the good of the balance. No more silence. She twisted the final lead and the hum died. Done, she breathed. Elias's reply came with relief and urgency. Good, because they're moving toward the central hub. We have to lock down now. I'm on my way. She crawled out of the conduit, boots striking metal, and sprinted back through the corridor as alarms wailed. In the cafeteria, chaos had become order by necessity. Isla's calm voice cut through the intercom. South valves open, pressure dropping. Repeat, pressure dropping. A cheer went up from the miners, but it was short-lived. A new sound rose behind it, a slow, deliberate clap. At the far end of the room stood the envoy, immaculate despite the heat and dust, cane tapping the deck with precision. 2 mercenaries flanked him, weapons lowered but ready. Well done, he said. A display of courage worthy of myth. Unfortunately, courage doesn't change math. JRC owns this station, and House Keth owns its debts. You've bought a few hours of pride. Nothing more. Elias stepped forward. You're finished, Varn. The data's already broadcast. Every colony in the rim has the logs. The envoy smiled thinly. You overestimate honesty. You think the rim will care who starved them if they can buy heat tomorrow? Truth is only valuable when it's profitable. Saya entered behind him, covered in frost and soot. Then let's make decency profitable. The envoy turned. Ah, the prodigal mathematician herself. You could have ruled beside me. Instead, you side with what? A maintenance chief and a mob of rust miners. People, she said evenly. They're called people. He drew a small blade from his cane, a ceremonial Kethri weapon more symbol than tool. Do you know what this means, Saya? It means House Keth cuts its losses. He raised it slightly. And you are a loss. The crowd tensed, ready to surge forward, but Saya didn't move. She simply took 1 step closer until the blade hovered inches from her throat. Her voice was calm, unshaken. Weight equals worth equals work, she said, reciting the oldest Kethri principle. You've forgotten the last word. The miners, the cooks, the children. All of them murmured the phrase back, louder each time until the air seemed to vibrate. Weight equals worth equals work. The envoy faltered, eyes darting around the room. The chant wasn't anger. It was certainty. Saya reached out and closed her hand gently around the blade, lowering it. "This station remembers," she said. "Even if you don't." The envoy stepped back, breathing hard. For the first time, he looked small. Elias nodded toward the mercenaries. "You can go. No one here wants a fight." They hesitated, then lowered their weapons and left with the envoy, whose voice was lost under the echoing rhythm of the chant. When the airlock sealed again, silence flooded in, a different kind this time. The storm outside had begun to ease, the lightning farther away, the hum of the vents returning to a steady, living breath. Elias leaned against the console, exhausted. "That's it," he said. "They're gone." Saya moved beside him, her hands trembling only slightly. "For now." Isla approached, grinning despite the soot on her face. "You realize we just survived a corporate war with a portable heater and meth." Elias smiled wearily. "Not bad for a day's work." They laughed, quiet, disbelieving laughter that belonged to people who'd seen too much and chosen to keep going anyway. In the days that followed, Thule 7 changed. The colony repaired its vents, resealed its domes, and rewired its heat grid under Saya's design, the countercurrent lattice. It used less energy than anyone thought possible. For the first time in years, they had surplus warmth. Every night, Isla chalked the day's coil count on the cafeteria wall, and people signed their names beneath it. A living ledger, public and proud. No more secrets. Elias turned down every offer of reassignment. He rebuilt the south span with his own hands, sometimes alongside Saya, sometimes alone. Their conversations were simple, practical, about airflow and pipe angles. But under them ran something unspoken, steady as gravity. One evening, as the storm lights flickered across the horizon, Saya stood beside him at the viewport. "You could have taken the promotion," she said. "Lived somewhere warmer." He looked at her, faint smile tugging at his mouth. "I did." Outside, the methane rain fell slow and quiet, each drop glowing faintly from the reflected lights of the colony. Inside, warmth hummed through the walls, not just mechanical but earned human warmth. For the first time, Titan felt alive.